What's up, guys? It's Patricia from tarantulaheaven.com, and here we have Miss Spidey, who is hiding in her little glass dome being adorable. Maybe she'll move for you, I don't know. But today we're going to talk about how to tell the difference between male or female tarantulas, or how to find out if your tarantula is a male or female. This is a really popular topic, and if you've been in any tarantula group or forum, you've without a doubt noticed that there are a lot of posts about sexing tarantulas or figuring out what gender they are. If you're new here, I put out tarantula tips, tarantula facts, weird things about my own tarantulas and observations I've had every single week. So if you're into that, please consider subscribing if you'd like to see more of that. And if you are a follower already, thank you so much for subscribing, and thanks for joining me this Tuesday. So sexing in tarantula language is the term for figuring out the sex of your tarantula, just so we're aware. Now, sometimes, especially if you're a new tarantula owner and you've perhaps bought your tarantula from a mainstream pet store or one that is not specialized in exotic pets, this can be hard to figure out because a lot of times these pet stores won't know what they're talking about, won't know a lot of things about their spiders, won't know the gender of your spider or the age or anything like that. So it can be challenging. You might have to do your own digging and researching and observing if you want to find out if you've gotten a tarantula from one of these places. This is a mistake I got myself when I got Miss Spidey from a Monster Pets, another mainstream pet store in Pennsylvania or elsewhere. And I actually went through a few months of thinking that Spidey was a male and his name at the time was still Spidey, so fortunately I kept the name because it was kind of unisex. But yeah, and then fortunately a more experienced tarantula keeper saw some of her pictures and was kind of like, hey, I don't think you have a male. So I was really thankful for that person educating me on that. And so that might be your experience too. It's also really useful and safe to, regardless of what you've been told, to do your own investigating because sometimes we are told the wrong gender regardless of who we've gotten our tarantula from. So the best way to find out the gender of your tarantula is to use a molt. So yes, this can be a little frustrating because you will have to wait for your tarantula to molt, and a lot of people don't like waiting. We're not very patient sometimes. And this can also be frustrating because sometimes slings, their molts are so tiny that they're near impossible to really look at or figure out what's going on. So you might even have to wait until your tarantula gets to a certain size or age before you can really get a good look at their molt. So you're going to have to wait for a molt for this particular technique, and you are going to have to examine their exoskeleton that they left behind during the molt. And this way allows you, it is so accurate because you're actually examining the sex organs from the inside of the molt, which really helps. So what you can do is once your tarantula molts, take that exoskeleton out. A lot of times the exoskeleton will be kind of warped or maybe even dried out and crunchy or weird. A lot of times the abdomen part of the molt, which is the part that you really need to sex your tarantula, is kind of misshapen. So what you can do is you can get it damp, put it in some water, and then slowly, very carefully start to spread the molt out, especially the abdomen part, so that you can actually examine it. And what you're looking for is the sex organs, and that is located between the two sets of buck lungs, which are those little, that's where they breathe on the underside of their abdomen. So what you're looking for is that in a female, she will have a flap or some sort of like little pouch called the spermatheca, which is the female sex organs in a tarantula. If your tarantula does not have this flap between the buck lungs, then you probably have a male. And this pouch is where the females store sperm after mating. If you want a more visual way of how to do this, in the blog post below, I have some really, really amazing videos included that show great tarantula owners doing this process. I have a great video from Tarantula Dan, Tom's Big Spiders, Tom Moran. There's also a great video by Mark's Tarantulas that shows this. So there are a lot of really great tutorials of how you can do that. And I think it's really useful to check those out because then that definitely gives you a much better idea of how to do this without just my words. So you'll be able to get a visual about how to do that, and very, very useful. Well, using a molt to sex your tarantula is by far the most accurate and best way to do this. You don't necessarily have to. There are a few physical signs, and while they're not always 100% accurate, sometimes we can rely on those. Like I said in the beginning of this video, that the person who was able to tell me that Spidey looked like more of a female just from her photos, she ended up being right, because maybe Spidey does have a lot of telltale signs of being a female. So I'm going to mention some of those physical differences here. However, I will say that if you want to be the most accurate, definitely take my advice about the molts that I gave before. So some of the physical differences are size. In many species of tarantulas, the females tend to be a lot bigger than the males, or at least have some noticeable difference. So males tend to be smaller, slimmer, their legs will be kind of long and skinny, and females tend to be larger and just bulkier and more robust. So that is one thing that you could use to kind of measure or see what your tarantula looks like in comparison to females of that species. Another physical sign, and this will really only be visible when a tarantula has reached a certain level of maturity. So when they're younger, it can be a little bit more difficult to spot these physical differences, but males who have reached a certain level of maturity will have bulbs on the end of their pedipalps. And sometimes, like pedipalps are those little shorter legs towards the fangs of the tarantulas. Male tarantulas will have almost these little like boxing gloves type things on the end, and it's like a little circular bulb. So those are the male tarantula's sex organs. Another characteristic that happens in mature males is that they will develop hooks on their front legs. And these hooks are used to keep the female in place and keep her fangs away from him while they're actually mating. So only males will have the bulbs and the hooks. And another difference that does not concern the molt of a tarantula is their lifespan. So you might have to wait a little while for this one, but in general, in many species of tarantulas, female tarantulas, they don't reach that maturity stage. Well, they do mature, but they don't reach that final maturity stage that male tarantulas do, because female tarantulas in tons of species generally live 2 to 3 times longer than the male species. So if you've had a tarantula for a really long time, she's probably a female. And if you've had a tarantula who has never hooked out or never developed those bulbs or never had a sperm web or a final molt, it's probably a female. So those are my tips for finding out the gender of your tarantula or sexing your tarantula. Like I said, I'm going to keep repeating it because I want you guys to have accurate information. The best way to figure out if your tarantula is a male or female is to use the molt. And that might require some patience, but it is by far the best way. And it's also just a really good experience for you to go through as a tarantula owner, especially if you're thinking about getting deeper into the hobby and getting a wide collection of tarantulas. It's good to figure out how your tarantula's bodies work. It's good to be really familiar with what their sex organs are, so in case you want to get into breeding, that is really helpful and useful. So it's just good experience for any keeper. Highly recommend. And if you do get confused, there are so many forums and tarantula groups full of really knowledgeable people that would love to help you, who've had their own success in sexing a tarantula. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any other tips for perhaps people who are less experienced who want to assign a gender to their tarantula, please leave it in a comment below. I hope this was helpful to you and found you well. And stay safe, guys. I hope you guys have a great week ahead, and I will see you next week for Tarantula Tuesday. Take care.